Greetings once again. This is your instructor, James Stevens, coming back for part 2 on chapter 11. We've been talking about bone health and osteoporosis, what it is, how it's diagnosed, and now we're going to start talking about some of the risk factors for osteoporosis. As we saw in the part 1 of this audio lecture for this chapter, we saw that as you get older, bone loss is inevitable. That starts at around age 30 at a slight degree, but ramps up at the time of menopause for women. We also know because of menopause and that cessation of estrogen production that women are at greater risk for osteoporosis, but it is still a condition that impacts males. We shouldn't leave them out of the equation. Also, genetics. If you come from a family of smaller frame built, light or fair-skinned women, then you probably will have a stronger risk for osteoporosis. Obviously, nutrition and physical activity, those lifestyle behaviors, in particular though, again, before age 30, because we know that that's kind of the magic point until which your bones are still producing or increasing in their bone mass or bone density. Also, women who have had a history of amenorrhea. Amenorrhea is the absence of menses or absence of a period, not at menopause, but premenopausally, and that can happen in women who have had an eating disorder or maybe who exercise excessively because they're an elite marathoner or they're an elite triathlete or perhaps a gymnast, for example. And those women achieve a very low percentage body fat, which impacts the hormone estrogen and can sometimes cause a stoppage, an abnormal stoppage of having a period. So those women would be at greater risk for osteoporosis, not just later in life, but even in their 20s and 30s. So women with eating disorders who for one reason or another no longer have their period can actually experience osteoporosis at a very young age. Some of the other risk factors I want to point out, one in particular is low body weight. Okay, low body weight. And that may seem surprising as to why that's a risk factor for osteoporosis, because oftentimes we associate low body weight with healthier outcomes. In this case, low body weight is linked to osteoporosis. We could also say in the same vein that a higher body weight is actually protective against osteoporosis formation. And that may seem very counterintuitive as well, because we often associate higher body weight with higher or greater risk of disease. But if you think about it, it starts to make sense, because our bones actually receive stress from our weight. Okay, so if you are of a higher body weight, then each day your activities that you engage in, just simple activities like walking, not necessarily exercise, but just your normal daily activities, with each step you take, you're placing a positive stress on your bones, which they respond to favorably. Someone who is a low body weight is going to be not positively stressing their bones as much. And when you expand that out across 20, 30 years or more of one's lifetime, their bones then have received less cumulative stress, and thus they have a more or greater likelihood of being osteoporotic. So that's an interesting risk factor for osteoporosis. Now, we don't go and tell people who are overweight or obese, hey, you're really doing a good job of protecting your bones against osteoporosis, right? We want them to lose weight because that excess weight could be impacting their health unfavorably in other ways. Okay, so age, we've already discussed this, decrease. The reason why age is such a strong predictor or risk factor for osteoporosis is the decline in those female and male predominant hormones, in particular loss of estrogen at menopause in women. There's some other factors as well. Older adults do not synthesize vitamin D from sun exposure as well as younger adults, and vitamin D is important for calcium absorption. And then a lot of older adults will cut out milk from their diets as they get older, possibly because they see milk as something that just kids or their grandchildren need to drink, not realizing that it can be important for their bone health as well. Again, gender, big risk factor. 80% of Americans with osteoporosis are women. Women tend to have a smaller frame than guys, so they're going to carry less weight in general. And then many women in their lifetimes will diet, and when they diet, they may cut out milk and dairy products, causing a lack or decrease in calcium. Women also are typically less likely to engage in activities such as weightlifting, which we'll discuss here in a moment. Once again, the loss of estrogen at menopause, I've said I think about 100 times now between parts 1 and 2 of this audio lecture, but it should not be discounted. And then lastly, women tend to live on average a couple years longer than males, and so their bones will experience that decline in bone density. Okay, what can be done for ways to reverse or at least delay the progression of lowered bone density with aging? Well, one of the things we know is that regular exercise is terrific for bones because it does create that positive stress to bones. However, the caveat is that the exercise must be weight-bearing in order to positively stress the bones. So things like walking, running, weightlifting, weightlifting being arguably the #1 activity for stressing bones positively. But anything that's done on your feet, hiking, playing tennis, playing team sports, dance, things of that nature, anything that you do on your feet is going to be weight bearing. Again, weightlifting appears to be the #1 exercise for promoting positive bone density. Now, when we think of people who have osteoporosis, generally we're looking at those older adults. In fact, in many cases, elderly adults. Now, when you become elderly, you start to develop some physical limitations, and you have more aches and pains. You may have arthritis. You may have a really bad back. It may be really painful for you not only to run, but even to do and engage in more simple activities like walking. So what happens is these elderly adults with those physical limitations, they start to gravitate away from walking, running, and other weight-bearing activities, and they do activities that are more gentle and less jarring and lower impact. So what do? Well, instead of running, they may start cycling. Okay, and they may start using a stationary bicycle at the gym instead of using the treadmill. They may, instead of doing other jarring, higher impact activities, they may like to get into the pool and start swimming or doing aqua aerobics. Now, cycling and swimming and aqua aerobics are all great activities for that elderly adult's heart and for things like blood pressure and for lowering blood cholesterol and lowering blood sugar and keeping them moving. However, those activities, albeit very popular, are not going to be weight-bearing. They're not going to promote positive bone density. So that's a real challenge in elderly adults, is trying to find, especially particularly those who are at risk for osteoporosis, is to get them doing these weight-bearing activities in a fashion that's comfortable for them. The other thing about elderly is that they start to develop issues with balance. And so they may do things like, again, use a stationary bicycle instead of a treadmill because there's less balance involved. And then obviously getting into a pool and swimming or doing aqua aerobics removes the possibility of falling and hurting oneself. Okay, there is no cure for osteoporosis, sadly. However, the progression can be slowed by a number of lifestyle behaviors. And being that this is a nutrition class, we're going to highlight the nutrition aspect. Again, Calcium and vitamin D. Calcium is very important, but it's not the only nutrient involved with bone health. We've got vitamin D, vitamin K, magnesium, phosphorus to some extent, and many others that are listed in the Chapter 11 textbook and slides that help to promote positive bone density. It's not just milk, dairy, and calcium. In some cases, an individual might need to supplement their diet if they're not able to meet some of their heightened needs, in particular for calcium or vitamin D. But again, that should be a secondary route. In other words, see what your diet provides in the way of these nutrients first, and then supplement the difference. Don't start your day off by supplementing the total amount that's required. What we've seen is, what research shows us is that those people who eat the highest amounts of fruits and vegetables seem to have the highest bone mineral density. In particular, one study showed that dried plums, which you may know by the name prunes, were the actual #1 best food for promoting positive bone density. And it's a food that many elderly people like. And then lastly, adequate dietary protein. You need to eat enough protein in your diet to ensure that you can produce that collagen that gives you the flexible component around which the hydroxyapatite is then built. What you should not do is consume lots of animal protein, lots of salty foods, lots of caffeinated beverages, and colas. Those all appear to detract from healthy bones. So if you're a young person now, you're under the age of 30, if you have a diet that contains lots of animal protein, lots of salty foods, you drink a lot of coffee and colas being the dark colored sodas like Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, etc. Those things are all going to sap your bone, your ability to maximally produce bone before the age of 30. Again, regular weight-bearing exercise like we discussed. And then for those individuals who have high risk for osteoporosis, or in fact diagnosed with osteoporosis itself, they would be placed potentially on different pharmaceutical drugs that would either slow down the activity of the osteoclasts that engage in bone resorption. Again, that's the demolition of bone. And then possibly on hormone replacement for the right individuals. That would be estrogen and testosterone. Again, estrogen and testosterone are like the foreman or the boss that encourage the osteoblast to build new bone. Well, I hope these 2 audio lectures on Chapter 11 pertaining to bone health have been helpful for you for better understanding this topic. In particular, I want to encourage you to start engaging, no matter what your age is, start engaging in the right healthy lifestyle behaviors that will prevent osteoporosis. Not only for yourself, but share this information with your family, friends, and whomever it is that you come into contact with in the future as part of your jobs. So thank you again for joining me for another HWE 100 audio lecture, and I'll see you next time.